everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. This is episode number 69 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia here, bringing you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. This week I have 11 new LitRPG reviews for you. But before we begin the show, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Dave Wilmarth. He's an amazing new Patreon for the podcast. He's a supporter who's pledged $18 a month to help us cover the costs of the podcast. That's right, folks. This podcast is not free to produce. It actually requires hosting fees, website fees, a bunch of other like little nickel and dime stuff for both the podcast, video, and audio, kind of stuff. Not super, $1 million expensive, but it's not free. And so any support that you guys can give is always welcome. If you want to help support the podcast, you can always go to patreon.com/Keep My Podcast, or there are a bunch of other ways to support the show at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But mostly this is for Dave, because Dave is an amazing supporter. He put his money and said, here you go, man. Do the good things you love to do. I enjoy it. Here you go. So thank you very much, Dave. You're an awesome guy. Okay, back to the regular scheduled program. New releases and reviews this week. Again, 11 new reviews, including Of Myths and Legends, which is Emerilia Book 9. Also, Legends of Tarthirious, Book 4 of Kylia's story. And then World Seed Endgame, which is the last novel in that particular series. And then Pixie Caverns and Creatures. It's a short story from Robert Bevan. Triss the Tinker, a Veilwalker short story. And also Gamer Girl in the Orc King's Harem. And then Space Knight, written by Michael Scott Earl and another guy whose name I can't remember at the moment, but I'll remember by the time we get to the review. Then also Mecha, a LitRPG adventure. Then the Arcane Survivalist, Apocalyptic Fantasy LitRPG. And then You're Not Allowed to Die, the 20-sided Eye series book. And last but not least, Bushido Online, The Battle Begins, the LitRPG Saga. I was going to try to get a 12th book in this week and review Lude Paladin Dread of Night, Virtual Fantasy LitRPG Adventures Book 2, but I realized I haven't read Book 1. I don't think it was labeled as the LitRPG adventure or story at all when it first came out, so I didn't review it at the time. And I'm seriously swamped with other novels, and I'm not the kind of person who can just jump into the middle of a series. I have to go back to Book 1, and then I can review Book 2, and I just don't have the time this week, and hopefully I'll be able to pick it up sometime later, but sorry, author of Lude Paladin. So sorry, Eden. I think the author's name is Eden. Sorry. Okay, on to LitRPG news. And LitRPG news, we have the couple of news stories in our upcoming schedule. Alpha World Book 3 is up for pre-order and will be available on September the 30th, so yay. There you go. Also, Travail Online Transcend, which is also the third book in that series, is up for pre-order, available September 29th, 2017. Also, Travis Bagwell, author of Awaken Online, has started to release chapters of his latest novels on Patreon for his supporters, including the stories from Awaken Online Retribution, which I believe is a side story in that universe, and War of One, which is a totally, I'm not even sure if it's a RPG, but it's called a totally new sci-fi book. So there you go. They're available to supporters at the $10 a month level or higher. So go to his Patreon and support him if you want to get those early chapters of those novels. Okay, and the last story in LitRPG news. Some of us, like myself, think we're super huge LitRPG fans, and I love, personally, tons and tons of LitRPG series, and I've talked to a bunch of authors, and I kind of think of myself as kind of a LitRPG nerd. But one dude took it a step further. He actually got a full-on, arm tattoo of the logo for the Chaos Seed symbols for Alaron Kong's Chaos Seed series. It's a full-on arm tattoo permanently inked to his arm there, and it's not tiny, it's really big. So he took his fandom to that next level. So good job on you. His name wasn't actually revealed by either Alaron or any of the sources I could find, but Alaron Kong saw that, and he actually offered the guy a full lifetime was worth of sign books for the author from now on for the rest of his life. So anybody that comes out, he's going to get a signed copy of it. So there you go. If you want free signed copies, you just got to get a massive tattoo of your favorite lit RPG author's work. I'm like, I would do that too. Like if somebody got a tattoo of something that I created, whether it's Adventures on Terror or LitRPG Podcast, I'm like, yeah, you get free stuff. That's a major commitment and show of fandom. So good on you folks. Okay, that's it for LitRPG news. We have a couple news stories that came out this week that I just haven't gotten to between the last podcast and now. There's a couple stories, including Desperate Times, and then Persephone Falling, and Zandaria, the Goop Split, which is the book 2 in that humor LitRPG novel series. Also, The Harem Girl, parts 1 through 3. This is each one is a short story. They are LitRPG. I checked in advance, but I haven't read them yet. Also, they came out as a Mob Grind, Raid Online, then also Camelot Overthrown, an Arthurian LitRPG story. Also, Fragged 4, and The Builder's Greed, Legendary Builders, Book 2 in that series. So there you go, some new stuff for you to check out. Again, I'll be reviewing it probably next week. Also, some new LitRPG audiobooks have come out as well, including Stay in the Wing, The Dark Herbalist Book 2, which I'm a huge fan of, Valhalla Online. Now, this one's actually interesting because it's not just one book, but 2. Those novels are slightly shorter than other series. So I believe it's like a 15, 16, 17-hour audiobook. Read 4 books 1 and 2 in that series. It calls it a Valhalla Online Publishers Pack. So get a nice deal there. And last but not least, of course, Made, which is Continue Online Book 2 from friend of the show, Stefan Marsh. So another good sci-fi LitRPG audiobook there. Okay, next is upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off the titles that are upcoming as far as I'm aware. Others have told me, or they're up on Amazon as pre-orders. This includes The Artificer, which is Viridian Gate DLC, coming out September the 17th. On the 18th of September, it'll be Null Protocol, which is going to be Omnicron Sector Book 2. That's kind of a sci-fi LitRPG series. September the 25th, 2017, which is my birthday, is going to be The Starter Zone, Revelations Chronicles Book 1. On the 27th of September, it'll be The Laboratory, a futuristic dungeon core. On the 28th, it'll be the On the Lost Continent, Alter Game Book 2. 29th of September, Travail Online, Transcend, Book 3 in that series. On the 30th of September, it'll be Alpha Company, which is Alpha World Book 3. On the 4th of October, it'll be Desert Runner, Patera Online Book 1. On the 10th of October, it'll be Emerilia Book 10. On the 11th of October, it'll be A Game with No Rules, Perimeter Defense Book 4. On the 16th of October, it'll be Fantasy Online Polonia. On the 16th of October as well, it'll be The Wizard Dungeon Core Book 1. And then we're skipping all the way to November to Desert Born Paternia Online Book 2. Emerilia Book 11, which will be out on November the 11th. On the 16th of November, The Shadowlands 3. And then all the way into December the 4th, The Twilight Obelisk, which is Mirror World Book 4. So there you go, folks. Got lots of stuff coming up. And again, if you have any LitRPG novels that you know you're going to put out at a certain date, shoot us an email at feedback@geekbustpodcast.com. Be more than happy to include them on the list so everybody knows when your story is going to come out. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, first in new releases and reviews, folks, it's going to be Of Myths and Legends, Emerilia Book 9, written by Michael Chatfield. This is 414 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. The Emperor has spoken and the portals are opening. The event is larger than anyone anticipated, with Emerilia's people needing to band together to survive. The creatures of nightmares and children's stories might roam Emerilia, but this isn't their land. This isn't their home. The Terror Alliance will use everything in their disposal to gain strength and push back the forces that roam Emerilia. The Pantheon moves in the shadows, the forests and across Malcolm. Light, earth, and dark forces only grow as they recruit those from the events into their ranks. Beset on all sides, Party Zero prepares for war not seen since ancient times in Emerilia. They know that this is only the beginning. So there you go, a little wordy. So this is kind of it. This is the beginning of the pumped up myths and legend invasion of Emerilia. And right from the get-go, folks, I let you know, action, from the very first page of the story. And for the most part, the action kind of stays there. The action in the story is it's front-loaded and back-loaded. And so that's where most of the super exciting actiony stuff is going to be. But again, right from the get-go, you do get a good bit of action. And the author does a really good job of kind of capturing the frenetic energy of these first fights when the Alliance is testing out all these different portals and all these different monsters to see what they're going to do, what kind of creatures they are, because they're kind of left in the dark. If you slightly spoil yourself, at the end of book 8, it was basically free for all. All the portals are open at Emerilia, so a bunch of new different monsters and creatures from Mythlands are supposed to be pouring out, and the Terra Alliance, which is the alliance of all the different nations of fantasy creatures, dwarves, elves, demons, whatever, humans, are supposed to have come together to fight them. And it's kind of a capture the castle kind of game where there are defense towers around each portal, and that is supposed to help the defenders to push back these invaders. And like I said, this is some really good action. I have a few caveats to that, which I'll get into a little bit, but it's really, really quite decent. Now, again, the action in the story is front and back loaded, and there's a huge chunk in the middle that is just preparation stuff and developing new tactics and developing weapons for the invasion. And in this section, there's also an update about the space stuff that's happening with the Jucal Rebellion and some cool crafting stuff here. And some of that space stuff is honestly my favorite part because it gives a different vibe to the story in that it's going a little more sci-fi-ish instead of just seeing fantasy action MMO kind of stuff. But be also aware that in this particular novel, there is slightly less RPG stuff. I mean, it's still LitRPG. Don't worry about that. But there's just less character sheets. There's less item descriptions. And that's mostly because of the scale of the story and that it's not such a small story anymore with Dave and his companions and his adventuring crew. It's a much bigger story involving the entire world of Emerilia and defending it from a bunch of invaders from other world or dimensions, and so it's just not as possible or feasible to do character sheets for it anymore because there's like 20 or 30 main characters or secondary and tertiary characters. But it is still there, but it's mostly focused around Dave, his updates and his skills, his crafting stuff. So just be aware of that. But again, really good battles. And the end is definitely worth sticking around for. There's a huge, amazing boss battle at the very end that leaves you kind of wondering if some sacrifices that are made there are kind of worth it. And I'm not going to swear what happens, but it's one of those, oh my gosh, can't believe the author did that kind of moments in the story. So for me, I had a good time. What stops it from being like a great story to me is there are a few more than normal editing issues. Misspelled words, incorrect grammar, repeated words occasionally, and that's kind of noted in the review as well. But also just the pacing of the story wasn't as action oriented as I thought it was going to be from the end of book 8. I thought this was going to be a bunch of fights with a bunch of different creatures, and it doesn't end up quite that way. Like there's still a good chunk of action, but it is mostly focused on 3 or 4 different invading races instead of like the dozens or hundreds that are kind of implied, but all these different portals opening up to different locations. So it's that massiveness is slightly scaled down a little bit, but the fights are really so good. But again, those little things stop it from being an 8. For me, it's still really good. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to Legend of Tarthirious, book 4 of Kylia's story, Legend of Tarthirious. A LitRPG 4. That's the long actual title of that novel, written by Zacharias Dracolius. This is 309 pages for 99 cents. You can't really beat the price on that. I mean, even if it's an introductory price for the first couple weeks of this novel, 300 pages for 99 cents. There you go. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited, so another plus. I'll read you the author's description. After surviving an attempted bombing and watching her informant, Bishop, get murdered on live television, Kylia feels like she's got a target on her back. A target that she thinks even the MPs can't shake off of her. Things aren't all bad for Kylia, though. As things progress well with her boyfriend, Gerald, she starts to see that maybe there's hope for her in the fast and ever-changing world she's stuck in. In this, the second last part of the Legends of Tarthirious saga, Kylia's life starts to get back on track despite the veritable plethora of curveballs that have been thrown her way. So there you go, folks. And that's a relatively decent description of what this novel is. I'm personally glad to see the series come back. I wasn't sure if it was just abandoned, but I'm going to see getting an update on what's happening with these characters. I actually like them. Kylia's story basically started as a tale of the government who has stripped its citizens, its people of citizenship, and forced them to pay back their fair share of the national debt to get their citizenship back. If they didn't by a certain period, like a certain age or something, they're basically going to get deported. And that's kind of the world that Kylia lives in. She not only took on her portion of the national debt, but also her deceased parents and her brothers, I believe. And so part of that first novel in that series is very interesting in that that's her reason for gaming so much. And a lot of people in this world game this way to earn extra money and to make a living, try to pay off this national debt as soon as possible. They're using this game, this VR game, to do so. And that's where the LitRPG stuff comes in, and it is justified by, this is why Kylia is such a gamer, why she goes in these adventures looking for such lucrative opportunities as possible to pay off this debt as soon as possible so that she's not deported. And that's basically book 1. Now in book 2 and 3, the story takes a kind of a thriller turn with anti-government agents using Kylia to show that it's a rigged system and that no one really gets to pay off their debts and get their citizenship back. There are explosions, assassination attempts, all kinds of good stuff. And then we come to book 4, which feels like the waiting game. Kylia is just gaining a sense of normalcy as she's shepherded by the police into protective custody along with her boyfriend. And the two game in this instance as a form of escapism. And all that debt deportation thing is kind of disappeared from the story by this point. And I'm not sure if it's going to come back. The gaming stuff really just feels like a bunch of little small little RPG short stories that are inserted into the real life narrative. And they don't really have any meaning to the story except that it shows that the main character is still a gamer. And I mean, there's some subtle relationship stuff that's also talked about within these game sessions between her boyfriend and herself, but it's mostly just they do stuff, they gain levels, they type of adventures, get cool equipment that's cool, but they're also like small short stories that don't mean anything for the larger story, which is fine. It's a choice. And again, this is very much a waiting game kind of story. There is some really cute relationship stuff between the main character and her boyfriend. There's tons of snarkiness from the main character, which is always appreciated by me personally. I like that kind of humor. But like I said, it's most of the novel feels like you're waiting for something exciting to happen. And it does happen. At about the 90% point, something really big does occur, which I'm not going to spoil. But a lot of the rest of the story for people who read it, it might feel like filler to them. To me, I see basically the emotional developments that are occurring within the story between Kylia and her boyfriend as they try to work out where their lives and relationships going. So that is there. It's just, but for me, if you can basically read the first 5% of the novel and the last 10% of the novel and basically get all the really, really important parts of the story to get to the next novel, that middle stuff just really isn't that compelling. And for me, it just really wasn't either. And so for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Not bad, just not like amazing good either. So there you go. Okay, next story, World Seed Endgame, written by Justin Miller. This is a mass of 652 pages. It is $3.99, so very appropriately priced. It is not available on Kindle Limited. And I believe that's because the author also puts some of this online, like the Royal Road and other places. So it's there as well. But again, go support the author if you like his stuff. This is the last entry into the novel series. I'll read you the author's description. The fourth and final installment of the World Seed series. Join John Hewlett as he faces new enemies, the likes of which he couldn't imagine, fighting against a hidden trauma and a conspiracy that goes beyond anything he can believe, discovering the ultimate truths behind the events of the universe. What will be the final outcome for him and his family? So there you go. And again, for me, I really enjoy this series. Not everybody is, but if you hear about the fourth book, it's nice to have an ending at least. The story begins with a 5-year leap into the future, and kind of the summarized notations of what happened in that 5-year period for the main character and his harem and his friends and family and crew members. And once that catch up is done, John and his group are basically almost assassinated as they celebrate one of the kids that they have's birthday party. and it turns into the huge threat to the universe. There's a new enemy, the new human empire. This is not too spoiler. It happens in the first 5% of the novel. And this empire is not above literally blowing up a planet or two to kind of make their point and reach their goals. So John and his crew and the alliances that they have made in the last couple books between the various alien empires and fantasy creature planets have to come together to try to stop this menace to the universe. Except that there are some really complicated backstories and some plot twists in here that I thought were kind of cool. And it's more complicated than they actually realized. So there's development of the story. For me, though, it was just kind of nice to see these people that I kind of care about go on one last adventure. For me, it was also remember the show Firefly? If you're watching the show, you probably are. Probably a fan of that too. That ended after one season, right? But they also made a movie called Serenity, which kind of gave the crew one last chance to go on this really big adventure and kind of wrap things up for the audience, right? Give them a sense of closure and finality. That's what this is. This is one last adventure for the crew and for John and his druid abilities and all of his, the crew has a bunch of, different class skills and whatever. And we see that it's that last adventure for them. And by the end of the story, everything's wrapped up. There's a certain finality to it, definitely. And it ended in such a way that I wasn't expecting, but I was, pleasantly surprised at least. That it ended this way. So I had a good time reading it. If you're a fan of this series, you definitely pick this up. If you've never read this series, start at book 1. What are you doing in book 4? But it's definitely one of those novels where you have to kind of get the other ones first. So I would encourage you to do so. For me, I had a good time of it. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to our next story. Short story, this one. Pixie Dicks, Caverns and Creatures. And Robert Bevan, I think the last couple of books have been, the titles have been slightly racier and racier. And I think he just likes hearing me almost curse at this point. So good job, Robert, if you're having fun at my expense or the reader's expense. But yeah, there you go. Okay, this one is 45 pages, 99 cents, not available on Kindle Unlimited. The author's description novel is only a couple sentences. All you need is faith, trust, and pixie dust. But I'm going to throw in blood, shit, vomit, piss, and amniotic fluid. That's the Caverns and Creatures difference. So there you go. So if you're not aware of the series, there's a ton of cursing and bodily fluid jokes and poop humor. So just be aware of that going into this. Even the short novels in the series are just as kind of like that. So if you're not into that kind of humor, don't read this. But if you like that kind of humor, kind of potty humor, and it makes you giggle when somebody tells a poop joke, this is definitely a story for you. Again, 45 pages, 99 cents. There you go. And I can't really talk too much about it. I had a good time reading it. My synopsis of the story is basically what happens when you piss off a pregnant, mischievous pixie. Some fairly good entertainment. There you go. The story is rather decent. It's not the best. It's not the worst in the series, but it was fun. I give it a score of 6 out of 10. It was enjoyable, which is not as enjoyable as some of the other stories in the series. So that's what I'm comparing it to. So there you go. I did like the dungeon aspects of the story. I thought they were very well done and super humorous. And I thought that was a nice satire to it. So there you go. Okay. On to Triss the Tinker, a Veilwalker short story written by Isaac Winter. So there you go. This is 27 pages, which is super short. But you know what? It's also $0.00. So it's totally free. Now, whether this is an introductory price or just the permanent price, I don't know. But that's what it is currently. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. But it also doesn't need to be. It's free. Free. Doesn't cost anything. So we definitely encourage you to go pick it up because it was good. I mean, I'll read you the author's description. And I'll get into it because it's a short story. Author's description. One night. One item, one last heist. After searching the world for clues and ingredients, Triss is one item away from crafting the Veil's most powerful artifact, an infinity potion. Good thing she knows just where to find one. The annual flower festival is coming up, and the guards protecting the crystal will be celebrating as well. All she has to do is go to the festival, make some small talk, then slip away and grab the crystal. Easy peasy, right? Wrong. When Triss's plan goes awry and forgotten evils attack the festival, Triss must choose the ultimate prize or the lives of those around her. And that is a very good description of what the story is. That's basically what it is. The author is essentially telling you about half of the story at this point. But that choice and those consequences and some of the power levels up and game mechanic descriptions in there are what make this, to me, a really good short story. The short story is given away for free as a promotional piece, as an advertisement for the novel, the author's novel in the same universe called The Lost Archive. And to get people to sign up for the newsletter. But for me, I don't care. It's free. It's a good story. And it's a good short story. And to be honest, I actually like the short story more than I did the full novel in the series because it's concise. It gets to the point. It doesn't sacrifice RPG mechanics for brevity. The action is well written, and there's enough new exploration of this Tinkerer class in there that I wanted to play the class myself. I thought there were some cool abilities, like nothing so like super new and amazing that it was like, oh, gotta write home about this, create fan fiction. But like enough, I'm like, okay, I wouldn't mind playing that class in an MMO on like a free, like your free 3-day pass, whatever it is. And extra bonus points, it's free. So there you go. For me, had a good time. Score a 7 out of 10. There you go. Okay, next one. Short story. Gamer Girl and the Orc King's Harem, written by Kat Wilder. She's actually written another novel in this universe. This is like book 2 in the series. It is 100 pages, 99 cents, so perfectly priced. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Be aware that this novel has sex in it. It is definitely, this author writes a lot of, under this pen name at least, like a lot of fantasy sex stories, even stuff that's not LitRPG. And she basically tries to combine that with RPG mechanics because there are fantasy creatures there as well. So there you go. I'll read you the author's description. In the player versus player MMORPG game Battle for Glory, it is kill or be killed. As the wizard's favorite apprentice, Kylia is kicking butt and taking names. She is besieging a castle when her old company comes to her foe's rescue. The up-and-coming warrior mage is quickly cut off from her troops, killed, and sent to a new respawn site insanely far away. Kylia is now not only trapped in the game forever, but stuck on the other side of the world of that virtual world. She's determined to get back home to her friends, but wizard, kobold, drow, and orc king stand in her way. King Rax is the biggest, baddest orc she's met, and his castle dungeons stand between her and success. What is an ambitious elf maid going to do but accept all challenges? There you go. And the author does give you a fair warning in the authorship saying this is adult themed, both bloody and sexy. Prudes and the screamers should avoid lest your whole insanity be shaken. It's not that raunchy. But it does start off with some fairly, graphic sex. This to me is basically, there's a lot of sex here and there's some interesting potential stories, adventures in between those little sex scenes, or not little sex scenes, but sex scenes. This novel is more light on the RPG mechanics than the last one. And that may be because the author assumes that you've read the first one, so she doesn't have to set it up quite as much. But so lighter in the RPG department than the previous version, previous novel. And some of the stuff that occurs within this game world doesn't always make sense according to those rules, but that's author's privilege. Outside of the sex stuff, the main character mostly wanders around a Newport City until she's captured by orcs while trying to rob them. She's made a sex slave, and there is a rather decent twist to the story at the very end, but it doesn't really make up for the lackluster story to me. So overall, I didn't really enjoy the story part. The sex was okay. Well, when I read of it, I mostly skipped through it, but it's the RPG stuff and the adventures in between. It felt like the character was mostly just wandering around and sort of getting into some adventures, but not really getting to adventures because it's a short story. And like I said, the end is a good twist. It just doesn't make up for the rest of the other like 90 pages of the novel. So there you go. Gets a score of 5 out of 10 for me. Just sort of a mastery, but it is LitRPG. So there you go. Okay, next story, Space Knight, written by Samuel E. Green and Michael Scott Earl, who's the author of the Lion's Quest LitRPG series. So there you go. This novel is 395 pages, $4.99. So again, pretty spot on the price point. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. In a universe where technology and magic coexist, Nicholas Lyons desires one thing: to serve his queen as a space knight in the Royal Trident Forces. But when his final mission as an academy cadet goes horribly wrong, Nicholas discovers he possesses illegal magical abilities that grant him power far beyond that of a normal man, knight, or mage. When a clandestine assignment lands Nicholas on the worst starship in the Kingdom's fleet, he finds a motley crew of warriors hiding their own terrible secret. Death and betrayal lurk around every corner, and Nicholas finds himself torn between his loyalties to his new crew and the oath he swore to his queen. So there you go. So not a bad description in there. However, you'll notice that there's no mention of game mechanics. There's no mention of LitRPG or RPG mechanics whatsoever. The Amazon description of this novel is very sci-fi, space opera focused, and with some fantasy like weapons and stuff in there too. But I can assure you right off the bat, it is absolutely LitRPG. It's simply lighter on the mechanics than some other people will like. I'm not getting into it though. But full disclosure first, I received an advance copy for review. I did purchase the novel once it actually became available on Amazon though. So there we go. Again, nicely priced at about 1.2 cents per page. The book again doesn't talk about as a LitRPG, but it is on the surface of the novel. Basically, I know Michael Scotero. I've interviewed him. Real nice guy. He writes a bunch of stuff. The Destroyer series. He also has a sci-fi series that he works on. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's totally sci-fi and it's doing really well. And he also has the Lion Quest series, which is something that's LitRPG that's focused for us in this community. And basically, I think this is something he's trying to appeal to both audiences for, both the LitRPG crowd and also the sci-fi crowd for his other series. And I think he does a really good job of finding a balance that probably satisfies both. It's not super LitRPG, not super crunchy at all whatsoever, but it has enough game mechanics in there, progression possibilities that, people who appreciate that kind of stuff will still enjoy it. The people who want super crunchy stuff, like stat sheets galore, item descriptions, armor descriptions, notifications popping up left and right, this isn't it. This is super light on that stuff. So if that's what you want, this is not the story for you. But if you're cool with just a cool sci-fi story that has space and magic and, some lighter LitRPG mechanics, this is totally cool. So just be aware of that going into it. For me, again, there is enough RPG mechanics in here that it qualifies as LitRPG. There's a ranking system that replaces levels. Characters go from cadets to squires to knights to specialty knights, which like special abilities and like special class stuff. Additionally, all weapons in the novel actually have item descriptions, but that's kind of the extent of what you get for as far as like descriptions go, which includes damage descriptions, special abilities, ruins that can be enhance the weapons, again the special powers, which is kind of pulling from that magic pool that's included here. Or the characters can turn those weapons break them down for arcane dust, which can be then used to create more powerful magic-based weaponry. There's also a kingdom point system that kind of acts as a dual purpose of currency, and also a type of XP, since you need a certain amount of kingdom points to take like your advancement test in this world. So to go from a cadet to from a squire to a knight, you need to accumulate something like I forget if it's 50,000 or 500,000 kingdom points, but you need a good amount before you can even take that test. So it kind of replaces the XP system in other LitRPG novels. But there is certainly used as a way to show progression. Okay. While personally, like I can accept that there's not a ton of LitRPG mechanics there. But that kind of takes it away a little because I'm super nerdy on that side there. I love details and game mechanics and all that kind of cool stuff. And this is lighter on that. But what kind of made up for it for me was basically the good sci-fi stuff, because I'm also a sci-fi nerd and I enjoy sci-fi stories, and I haven't gotten a chance to read a ton because I'm kind of reading like these LitRPG. So this was kind of a nice departure from some of the fantasy stuff and to get into kind of a space opera stuff that still had RPG mechanics there. For the record, it kind of takes a little while to get to that sci-fi stuff though. It doesn't start until about 23% into the novel. Before that, it's basically the main character taking his academy test, but the emphasis is definitely on the magical ruin technology. So it's a bunch of sword swing, armor stuff, killing monsters kind of thing. And there's very little sci-fi stuff. There's mostly, it kind of feels very fantasy-like, which is kind of makes it a slow introduction into the world for me. But once you get to that sci-fi stuff, that's it for the rest of the novel. And that's kind of the thing that I think makes this novel different from other stories, in that it is kind of a space opera with RPG stuff in there. And if you're a fan of like Warhammer 40K, you're probably going to like this story because it does combine technology and magic effects to good effect to me. Let's see. And just in case you're aware, yes, melee is a big part of the story. And in a sci-fi world, how they kind of justify this is basically that they have personal shields that deflect ranged weapons, but it still allows slower melee weapons through. So if you're familiar with Dune, it's that kind of shield system where, it's a personal shield, and it stops a certain amount of like damage from ranged weapons. But there's also a limited power supply. So the characters have to balance between like using their magic abilities, whether it's armor or weapon based, and keeping up their shield and keeping away range damage. So it's a nice little combination and balance there as well. So there we go. There's a cool magic rune system in it that kind of gives an almost infinite number of possible weapon and armor skill abilities. And it's kind of the justification for adding magical powers to this kind of world. The action scenes in the novel are pretty gritty. Fight scenes are pretty badass. You get, your standard alien monster threats, but also you get some intrigue in the novel between kingdom factions. And so the main character gets caught in between those worlds, and there's some nice, space knight on space knight fights as well. So that's kind of nice. Overall, again, the novel is light on RPG stuff, but the constant action kind of makes up for it. And if you're looking for an action-packed world full of magic tech and space battles, this is for you. I enjoyed it personally. But if you want a crunchy LitRPG novel, this is probably not going to be it for you. So just a heads up. Personally, I had a good time with it, though. It gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. There you go. Okay. Next, Mecha, a LitRPG adventure written by Eric S. Brown. This is 110 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description out of respect. It is Chris never planned on being a hero. Of course, he never planned on being quite possibly the last human left alive either. He watched the Earth die from orbit as a virus swept across the globe, and all that survives of the human race now resides in the total immersive video game known as Kyland. However, that virtual world has been infected by a digital version of the virus that left the Earth in ruins. Chris and his team of fellow mech pilots must find a means of stopping the virus inside Kylan before the legacy of humanity is erased forever and all that remains are giant monsters that the virus created in its wake. Okay, there's a number of issues I have with this novel, including how does a biological virus turn digital and affect a game world? If the main character is the only person in this virtual reality world, how is he accomplishing anything? Is everything else an AI? And if so, why does he care if it gets messed up? But putting those aside, the biggest issue we have with this novel is it's not actually a LitRPG. Yes, it's set in a VR game, but that's just kind of an excuse to explain away the mech stuff and the demon stuff. It's basically mechs versus demons in this novel. And if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for something kind of sci-fi oriented, where there's a lot of good action, this is cool for you. I'm not saying it's a bad novel or anything, but it's not LitRPG, which is what it actually says in the title. It's called Mecha, a LitRPG adventure. But there are no actual game mechanics in the story. There are no RPG elements at all. It's seriously just a sci-fi story of mechs versus demons that just happens to be set in a VR world. That's it. So there you go. So for me, gets a score of 4 out of 10 because it's not LitRPG. The end. Okay, next, Arcane Survivalist, apocalyptic fantasy LitRPG, written by Deck Davis. This is actually the same author who's written the series called, he wrote another story, The Monster Spawn, and the name Decker Davis. So same author, just slightly modified author name. But oddly enough, he hasn't linked those stories to the same author name, so maybe something I'll have to address. It is 317 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. After experimenting with dark matter, Dr. Benny Atkin inadvertently opened a portal into another dimension. He found himself in a world called Rhabdo, a place where he was given magical powers and killing stuff made him stronger. Think RPG world. Okay. A dark mage guild soon discovered the portal and found a way to get through it. Dr. Benny Atkins' self-proclaimed genius had unwittingly visited a fantasy apocalypse upon the earth. At the starting point, a small town called Pasture Downs. In a fit of desperation, Benny sends blue orbs back through the portal in hopes that a few heroic residents of Earth will find them and absorb their powers, granting them magical skills they can level up by killing things. Who are these heroes or legends? Unfortunately, one of them is Ash Hobbs, a con man and self-confessed ass. After stumbling on an orb, he becomes a blood mage, and together with a companion called FF, who lives in his head, Ash must learn to stop being such an ass and find the strength to save the world as a blood mage. So, relatively decent description of the novel. That whole thing kind of takes up the first 15% of the novel, which honestly is a little bit long. But I should warn you in advance, there are fairly regular spelling and grammar errors in the story. It's been an issue for a lot of the reviewers and readers in the novel, and that they get into it and they just can't continue. For me, it wasn't bad. I've read a lot worse. They come at about one error every 1 to 2 pages. And so if that's too much for you, just skip the story because it's going to bug the heck out of you. So just giving you a heads up there. But for me, my brain eventually just stops seeing them as I read it or listen to it as a text-to-speech program. So I didn't have too big an issue with it, but I know a lot of people do. Okay. For me, I'm not really sure if this is supposed to be an anti-hero story or a reluctant hero story. Either way, Ash, the main character, is presented as a total jerk. He's a con artist trying to escape from a small town he swindled. Then the magical RPG Apocalypse starts, and he finds a blue orb that makes him a blood mage. And for those who aren't familiar with that class, a blood mage uses his health or blood, health points, whatever, to fuel his spells. And a lot of the class abilities and spells in this character are centered around either sending his health to someone else, using it to fuel specific spells, or grabbing health from other creatures and using it to restore his health. And so it's kind of a cool class that really depends on an intelligent player to maximize its usefulness. And that's kind of the biggest draw in this novel for me, is that the main character is intelligent, but he's also not super RPG. He's not a super gamer or anything, but he's smart enough to realize the benefits of this class and how to use it well. Additionally, he also has a kind of AI companion that he's a total jerk to, and names him FF, which is F face. I'm not comfortable cursing on the air, but that kind of tells you the level of a jerk that he is. But that is also counterpointed by the fact that he's supposed to be a kind at heart kind of guy, good on the inside kind of dude, but total jerk to everybody on the outside. And he uses these powers to hopefully try to save this town he swindled. Not out of active contrition necessarily, but because they're the closest town and he needs resources. But he also sort of feels partially, maybe a tiny bit guilty for swindling them out of tons of money in a kind of Ponzi investment scheme. So there you go. That's kind of the core of the story. Again, this novel is mostly just action stuff. So if you're looking for a heavy, cool plot line with lots of twists, this isn't it. It's mostly just fight scene. And in between those fight scenes, there's a loose story about monsters evading from another dimension and evil RPG interdimensional beings trying to take over the Earth. And also a kind of apocalyptic sub-thread kind of weave through this, where all the electronics on the Earth are knocked out. And so there's a survivalist kind of thing going on here as well, hence the title. Overall, just a good story. If you can ignore all the spelling grammar errors, I had a good time. I like action stuff. And there's a ton of action. And again, interesting use of skills and magic abilities, not just from the main character, but from other characters in the story as well. But there's not much else to it. And so if you want something like, amazing and Shakespearean, and this isn't it. It's just action scene, kill stuff, get new powers, learn how to use them well, more killing, and a bunch of story justification to get to those action scenes, which is cool. Just be aware of what you're getting into when you read the novel, and you'll have a good time. For me, score is 7 out of 10. There you go. Okay, next. You Are Not Allowed to Die, a 20-sided series book written by Kip Tarrington. It is 240 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. That's it. I'll read you the author description. Joe's body is filling him. In order to make his last weeks of life more palatable, he goes into a full digital immersion game. This new process will allow him to play in a virtual environment with a fake but healthy and strong virtual body. As soon as he steps into this new environment, he meets his virtual assistant, an evolving intelligence, an EI. EIEIO. That's what I think of whenever I see that. Who takes the form of someone close to him and goes by the name Spooky. After explaining some of the game functions, she gives him his first items. Before Joe and Spooky can begin to play the game, though, they are both summoned to a reality where magic is real. Due to the coincidental timing of this event, Joe believes this is just all part of the digital immersion. He's unaware that the summoning has healed his real body, making him now truly young and powerful. As he still believes that he is dying, he lives every moment to the fullest, unaware that he's now a near immortal. Well, what happened to his assistant? I'll forget the rest of it. Basically, it's as the author describes. The core story is that the main character thinks he's dying. He goes in a virtual reality environment. Him and his AI are taken to a new world, and they're expected to be champions of this new world, and to fight for truth, justice, and good people, basically. And opposing them are a bunch of other gods and influences in the world, and a bunch of other powers, whether they're national or kingdoms or just high-powered individuals in this fantasy magic world. And he is given, the main character and his AI are given a castle, and there are a bunch of cool possible story options, including like castle building, and nation building, and large siege stuff and dungeon stuff in there. They're all possible in the story and kind of teased in there. Most of those things aren't follow through though. So the majority of the story is actually going to be world building stuff. There's a bunch of cool backstory stuff that the author gives us. Character development, whether it's the main character or some secondary and tertiary characters in the story. There's a lot of good game mechanic exploration and explanation. So if you like detailed game mechanics, this is definitely a cool story for you. And that's the majority of the story. It's all really well done. It's just that it takes a long time to get to any action stuff. And if you're looking for action story, there were a few good action scenes in this novel, but they're very well spaced out. Like I think there's a total of 3 or 4 fight scenes in the entire 242 pages. And you don't actually get to your first fight scene, so you're almost halfway through the story at the 40% mark. So again, be aware of your expectations entering this novel. I think a good portion of the story focuses on introducing the main character of the world, him developing the first members of his new kingdom, some small stories about them and other beings that exist in the RPG world. It's really good stuff. I enjoyed it. But again, don't expect a ton of action here. So that's it. This is kind of a different kind of story. Overall, I had a really good time reading about the different magical choices available to the main character, learning about game mechanics implemented in the world. I mean, one in particular, the main character gets the ability to learn magic skills based upon his empathy and his high charisma. So the novel is basically set up to later on, hopefully in the other novels in the series, bring in other characters and other types of people to make the main character more powerful. Like he becomes more powerful the more people he surrounds himself with, basically. So it's one of those kind of kingdom building stories. It's just that they haven't actually started the kingdom building stuff in this novel, which is kind of a disappointment, which kind of stops it from being better than the score I gave it. Again, a lot of aspects are hopefully going to be developed more in future novels, and just they weren't here. Most of it's just explanations, a few fight scenes, character development, and that's kind of it. The other things that are kind of teased, again, castle building, kingdom building, dungeon diving, large scale fights, they're not here. And that's really what stops from being like a great story for me, but it's still good. I had a good time with it. And hopefully we'll see all those things in book 2 or book 3 in the novel series. But for me, it's a score of 7 out of 10. Good, just not great. So there you go. Okay. On to last story, Bushido Online. The Battle Begins, a LitRPG saga written by Nikita Thorne. So there you go. Also the publisher, LitRPG Freaks. Okay, this is 371 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. You know what? I'm not going to read you the author's description because it's way too long, and this is already a long podcast. Okay, a lot of the reviews on Amazon really like this novel. It has quite a few 5-star reviews, but for me, it wasn't that great, to be honest. The only thing that made this mildly interesting is kind of the setting that the VR game is set in. Instead of a Western sword and sorcery setting, the game is set in feudal Japan with samurais and ninjas. The monsters are really unique, and I think they're probably my favorite part of the series, of the novel, I should say. They're pulled from a completely different mythos, so you're not going to see like goblins and ogres and trolls. Instead, you're going to see things like lizard wolves with a unique name, cloth monsters, which again, a specific name that I'm not going to remember, and spirits. So they're all a lot of Japanese myth oriented monsters that you're pulling from, and always like those unique creatures because they, you kind of get tired of killing goblins and bunnies in these novels. So for me, it was at least nice to see a different variety of creatures for these characters to kill. And on the surface, this kind of theme, this Japanese theme, makes the novel feel sort of new. And so I think that's what's drawing a lot of these really great reviews. But the reality is, if you look under that surface, besides the monsters in the story, most of the gaming class mechanics are really rather standard MMO stuff. The knight ability, like Power Strike, is replaced with the samurai ability called Focus Strike. Ninjas have Assassin Strike instead of a Backstab. And the basic user interface and character sheets all have the same normal MMO stuff, including health, energy levels, class inventory, player versus environment stuff. Nothing bad. I mean, it's not saying I'm not saying it's bad mechanics or bad game mechanics, or they're just not new or unique. And so that is not a draw. I mean, the like the backstory of the world is cool. I'm not saying it's not. And for some people, it's going to feel very fresh. It just wasn't the new thing that I was hoping was going to be looking at the cover. Now, the story itself, not that amazing either. The basic premise of the story is that the main character, Seth, goes blind after a cheap shot from his opponent in a martial arts bout. He then logs on to the VR game Bushido Online using experimental equipment and finds that in this game world, he can see again and he can move just like he used to. But since he's never been a gamer, he has to learn all the rules of this world fresh. And so that kind of justifies explaining how everything works. And that sounds like a good story premise. It really does. But it ends up being a noob's daily adventure in VR. That's what it comes down to, basically. The main character stumbles through situation after situation, learning about basic game mechanic stuff and basic game stuff while using his martial arts skills to gain levels, which is cool. He has random adventures that he's pulled along through by the random players he meets. And that's kind of it. That's kind of what the story is. It's just adventure, kill stuff. As he goes through the story, he learns about these mechanics, whether it's going to be what armor is, what his abilities are, what these stats mean, what levels are. Eventually training, what are trainers, how to craft stuff, group stuff, all that has to be explained to him. So it's very much a noob experience for this main character, which might be a draw for some people. It just wasn't for me. And again, it's not badly written. All this stuff is not bad. It's just not super compelling because it doesn't add anything new. There are better daily LitRPG adventures. I would recommend Life in the North or A Healer's Gift, Adventures on Brand. Both of those are also kind of daily adventure series or novels where it's just a bunch of events. Great, but doesn't have to be necessarily like amazing story arc, but it's just what draws. What I liked about those stories in particular was that they were new. Their settings were fresh, but also their game mechanics were fresh, whether they made a survival apocalypse story. And so there was a balance of like resource management, or whether it's just a nice group mechanic system from like Adventures in Brand, and it's a new world, and it's also a bit shorter. So it's more palatable. And the game mechanics in the novel are also not standard. Even Adventures in Terror, the novel that I wrote, is basically a daily adventure story. At least book one is. But what I wanted to add in there was culture mechanics and family mechanics and some dungeon diving stuff that I thought was kind of new and fresh. And this novel just doesn't really add anything new and super fresh that makes it interesting, despite not really having a super compelling plot. There are also a few logic stories of the problem, like why doesn't the main character ever log out? The entire novel, I think, is supposed to take over the course of like 2 weeks, but he never logs out once. So is he dead in the real world, or is somebody changing his colostomy bag or something? The main character is also just blind. So why doesn't he ever use the equipment that lets him see in the game to see in the real world using like a camera or something? That would really probably help him out. And just those small little like logic details kind of bothered me as somebody who also who looks at those and notices those. And it really just would have taken like a couple lines explaining why those things occur, or just like justifying why he's there for such a long time. Maybe time compression or something like that would have worked. It just never explained. Overall, the setting of the story kind of reminded me of the Oriental Adventures rulebook from Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of an older rulebook, which attempted to adapt Dungeons and Dragons rules for adventures set in the Far East. And there are a bunch of cool new classes and monsters, but at its core, it really felt like an adaptation of those rules. So it didn't bring new rules, it just was already adapting the existing rules. And that's what kind of occurs here. That's what it feels like. It feels like it's adapting rules you're probably already familiar with if you've read more than 2 LitRPG stories. And it's not really bringing anything new in that respect to the story. And so with the Oriental Adventures from Dungeons & Dragons, the thing that made those campaigns great was the story that the Dungeon Master told. And that's what made those settings cool. It wasn't necessarily the adapted rules. But in the case of this novel, neither one of them is occurring. The game mechanics aren't amazing. They're not new and they're fresh. But the story is also not super compelling on its own. And so for me, it just stopped it from being good. It's, again, not a bad story. It's not meh. It's just slightly better than meh, but not good. Not 7, basically. It gets a score of 6 out of 10 from me. So there you go. That's it. We are finished. Finito, done. Remember, everybody, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. If you want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com. But that's it. 11 novels. Got through them, folks, this week, and I tell you, I was reading up until the last minute before this podcast, trying to finish all those novels, and I got through them, and I have more to read next week. So there you go. But I do it because I genuinely love the genre. I love you guys, and I want to help share and broadcast the great stories that are in our genre, because I think they're amazing. And so thank you for hanging out with me while I gush about this thing that I love, LitRPG. And until we can do so again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG.